Do you know what time it is, folks? It's time for the 2024 Major League Baseball season. The New York Mets begin anew, and we cannot wait to see how this thing is going to play out, despite early low expectations. So, folks, the New York Mets begin their journey here in 2024 after an off-season where it appeared that the Mets were trying to do a soft rebuild, and the expectations going into this season certainly not very high at all. Not in the National League, where the Atlanta Braves, the Philadelphia Phillies, the LA Dodgers, even teams like the San Francisco Giants, Cincinnati Reds, and Chicago Cubs all look like they're going to be teams that could be challenging for the NL pennant, and certainly in the postseason this year. Whether that plays out exactly that way, we'll have to wait and see. But as I mentioned in my last video on the Mets, things changed just a little bit last week when the Mets brought in J.D. Martinez. So what are going to be the keys here in 2024 to make this season a successful one for the New York Mets? Let's talk about it. As I did with the Yankees, I'll start with the young guys again here in the case of the Mets. Brett Baty, Francisco Alvarez. What kind of season are we going to be in store for with those guys? Because start with Brett Baty, who played 107 games last season with the Mets. He is going to be this team's third baseman. Showed some pop last year, but also showed some inconsistency, typical of a young player. Can he grab the bull by the horns and be the answer for the Mets at third base long term? Also, Francisco Alvarez. A lot of people have high hopes in Alvarez, and he showed a lot last year, hitting 25 home runs last season, but only hit 209 during the season. Can he not just continue with the power, the surge of power, and being one of the better hitting catchers in Major League Baseball right now, especially a young player, but can he develop into a more consistent hitter and also even a better catcher behind the plate? He too got into some good shape this year, lost some weight in the offseason, and we're going to learn a lot more about Alvarez and Baty being kind of the centerpieces for this Mets team as far as their young players that they have coming up through the system. And as we know from last season, in the trades that the Mets made for Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, they certainly got enough players in return that are coming up through the system, namely one of them being Luis Angel Acuna, who could be a player we see potentially maybe be a player that could get involved maybe later this year, certainly by the time we get to September call-ups, and certainly going into next year as well, for that matter. So that leads to another big key. Not only do the Mets have to have the young guys contribute in a big way, but what are the Mets going to get out of a lot of their veteran players who either A, have struggled, or B, need to step up? And a couple of names to watch this year, and I see them get thrown out there as far as trades are concerned. Jeff McNeil, Starling Marte. Marte is going to have a big season this year, or needs to have a big season this year. 2 years ago, he was you want to say linchpin, you want to say he was a spark plug for this Met offense. He certainly was a couple of years ago when the Mets won 101 games that year. But since that point, suffering injuries towards the tail end of 2022 and most all of 2023, he certainly didn't look like the same player, and he still looks like he is off here in spring training in 2024. Can Starling Marte get back on track here this season? Not only will that help the Mets, but potentially, if the Mets are out of it, certainly someone that they could dangle out there as a trade possibility and get more prospects in return. McNeil as well. A lot of people have mentioned him as it's a trade piece if the Mets end up falling out of it. It was mentioned in the New York Post the other day. I could certainly see that happening. But right now, the focus for the Mets should be can he continue to help this team? Remember, this guy who was a batting champion a few years ago, can he get back to being close to a 300 hitter here in 2024 for the New York Mets? That all leads to, of course, two very big names, and these are my next two keys here for the Mets here in 2024. The biggest being Pete Alonso. Yes, he is a free agent this year. He is going to command a mega contract in the offseason next year, whether it be $300+ million. And the question is going to be, will he stay with the Mets? Will he give the Mets a hometown discount? That's probably not going to happen. But will he ultimately stay with the Mets is the question that everyone keeps asking. You have to expect that Alonso in a walk year is going to have a big season. He hit 46 home runs last year, but only, again, struggled to really hit consistently last year. you would expect that Alonso, a guy who hit 217 last year but is a lifetime 260 hitter, is going to get close to around 250, 260 this season, you would think, and could hit 50 home runs. I could see it in a walk year. If he does, he's going to get a huge contract. Mets are hoping that he does have that kind of year, because if he does, Mets are going to be in for a pretty good season and could be in the mix towards the end of the year in September, if that's the case. That all leads to this. J.D. Martinez. What kind of impact is he going to have on this lineup here in 2024? Obviously, from the leadership standpoint, we saw a little bit of it once he signed with the team, kind of taking Mark Vientos under his wing just a little bit near the batting cages, as the two of them were speaking about this upcoming season, about how they can help one another. Martinez is going to be a big part of this clubhouse. He's going to be a big part of this team. And also this lineup, if he hits well, I know he's 36 years old. And it's asking a lot of a player who's 36 years old, who didn't have a spring training this year, to come out and hit 30-plus home runs. It's asking a lot, to be honest with you. But if he can still hit well and hit 20, 25 home runs this year, maybe even close to 30 home runs this year, and hit for a consistent average, that just lengthens this Met lineup and makes them that much deeper and takes a lot of pressure off of a lot of other guys, especially Pete Alonso. He has not had somebody behind him with that much pop, as is the case with J.D. Martinez. So that just helps things out for the Mets here in 2024. The other big key, of course, two more I want to mention here. I know this is more than five now. The bullpen, Edwin Diaz. He is finally back. We get to see Edwin Diaz back for the first time in a couple of years. 2 years ago, this guy was lights out. 1.31 ERA, 32 saves, Narco, you name it. He was fantastic. The question's going to be, after a year off, due to the knee injury, what is he going to look like this year? He's looked good in spring training, but again, now we're going to see him in regular season action here almost every other day when he gets the call. If Edwin Diaz looks like the guy we saw 2 years ago, then this bullpen is only going to be better. This team is only going to be better in 2024 with a healthy Edwin Diaz. And that all, of course, has to, the only way we get to Edwin Diaz is with this rotation. This is the Mets' Achilles heel in 2024, is their starting pitching. It's not great. You look at it on paper, it has to scare you if you're a Met fan. Jose Quintana, who hasn't had a full season starting since, 2019. Luis Severino, who has battled injuries in his times with the Yankees. Sean Manaea, who has been up and down throughout his career. Tyler McGill, who's been inconsistent here with the Mets throughout his career here in New York. And then Adrian Hauser, who's been an okay pitcher with Milwaukee. It's not a great-looking rotation. And if the Mets are going to struggle this year, and if they're going to fall out of it this year, it's going to be because of this group of starting pitchers. The Mets don't have an ace. They hope to get Kodai Senga back fairly soon. He right now is their best pitcher. So the Mets are trying to really go with smoke and mirrors right now with the starting pitching. And that's why you have to say they're just trying to be competitive right now. If the Mets are in the mix come July, August, maybe they had a starting pitcher. If not, then hey, look, then obviously the pitching has failed them greatly here this season. So that is the biggest concern the Mets have going into this season. And the last thing that's going to be a key for the Mets is team chemistry, and that's going to fall on Carlos Mendoza, the manager. Last year there was something wrong, whether it be chemistry with Buck Showalter, whether it be Buck Showalter butting heads with Billy Epler in the front office. We all heard about all kinds of crazy rumors that are getting banted about towards the end of the season that led to Showalter getting fired and eventually Billy Epler resigning, as he ended up being banned from baseball because of the way he was working with the injury list. All kinds of crazy stuff last season. Can Carlos Mendoza cancel all the noise and just get this team to focus in on the one mission, and that's winning baseball games on a regular basis? If he does that, and if he's able to get this clubhouse back to being where it was a couple years ago, where it was so tight and so united, then he would have done a very solid job in his first year as manager. So those are the keys here for 2024 for the Mets. I'm leaving in the description box the link to my interview with John Pielli, as we had a discussion on the Mets season going into this year on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey. Take a listen to that. We'll talk to you next time.